Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys Avengers Endgame 1/6 scale figure unboxing and review video. Now today we're going to be taking a look, finally, at Nebula. This has been a figure that I have wanted ever since the very first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Finally, she's here. Yes, we are still waiting on Gamora, but fingers crossed, the wait won't be too much longer. Now, I personally picked up my Nebula from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is, of course, in the description below. They do have 12-month payment plans if you're a fan of paying off your figures over time. Also, while you are down there, why not hit that subscribe and bell notification icon so you're notified as soon as brand new content goes live on the channel. Also, check out the join button to find out more about Justin's Collection Plus, the YouTube channel membership. You do get early access to videos as well as an exclusive 5% off code for toyswonderland.com. More info is available in the Justin's Collection Plus video live on the channel. What we are going to do now though is get the box laying flat in the light box and do the unboxing. And here, of course, we have the box art for Nebula herself. Really nice image of Karen Gillan as Nebula right up there on the front. Again, it's that very soft oil painting aesthetic with this sort of blue dust around the outside. On trend because Nebula is, of course, blue, so this works quite nicely. Now, of course, on the side, you do have Nebula and the Ravager logo, and just some legal information on the back. The wait has been fairly long for Nebula, of course, ever since we saw her first appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy 1. If you'd asked me then if I thought we would get a Nebula figure, I honestly would have told you no, I don't think we will, but Nebula has become somewhat of a main character, especially now with Avengers Endgame, so finally Hot Toys decided to give us the figure we deserve. Fingers crossed she is as good as the promo pics lead me to believe. And of course, here she is. First impressions? Pretty darn positive, especially that head sculpt. Whenever it comes to aliens or weird different characters with sculpting and weird odd types of skin tones, Hot Toys seems to nail it, so fingers crossed when we take a much closer look at this head sculpt, we find the same thing. Now, of course, she does come with a bunch of accessories, so what we are going to do now is get all of this stuff laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything she comes with. And here we have all of the accessories that come with Nebula. Now, as you can see, she doesn't come with a hell of a lot of stuff. It's pretty bare bones. There's one key accessory being that orange plate that would go on her head that she didn't come with. I don't know why Hot Toys didn't engineer the figure to have it. You'll hear me mention it a couple of times throughout the course of this video. If you don't really care about that, then that's perfectly fine. Just ignore me whenever I bring it up. One thing though, they're kind of rubbing salt in the wound here. The orange A. There's no orange pretty much at all on the entire figure except for the Ravager logo, so that's kind of them being a little bit cheeky. This should have been blue in my personal opinion, but still, it's a very nice Avengers Endgame display base. Nebula printed on the front, no metal nameplate, but I guess that's something we're going to have to learn to live with. A regular style crotch grabber. Now you can see, of course, she does come with a couple of energy effects, and these go hand in hand with her batons. They simply and very easily slot on there. You can kind of finagle it and get it to however you'd like it to be there, but it's very simple, yet very effective. I really do like these energy effects. The batons themselves are very nicely detailed. You can tell they're supposed to be metal, they're worn and pitted, but then on the telescopic sections, because of course they're usually on the inside, they're very, very clean, so it's a nice contrast between the two sections. No, they aren't made out of metal, but at the very least you do get two, and they look pretty badass. She does come with a collapsed version of it, and it's pretty much the handle of this one, and they look fairly similar in detail, except of course this is collapsed. You'll have to let me know, it's been a while since I've watched Endgame or seen Nebula in action. She only comes with one collapsed version. Does this somehow split into two batons? It's quite curious to think if that's what actually happens in the movie. Again, let me know down below. She does come with one blaster. This thing is straight up gorgeous. There is so much detail on here. There's this hex weave pattern for the handle. It's got this bone-like finish on the top, then the heat treatment on the barrel. As I said, it's gorgeous. I love it. This happens to be one of my favorite weapons in all of the MCU. Whenever I see this thing on screen, it just pops, and it does in 1/6 scale as well. For some reason, that glossy white section on top just works for me. This thing is a feast for the eyes. Now, she does come with a holster for this. It is separate in the box, but I've actually already installed it on the figure. You'll see it a little bit later in the video. She does, of course, come with a couple of hands as well. The cool thing is they are different. She's got one robotic arm and one normal arm. The detail on this is fantastic. The fingers are really nice and thin, and I just love how it's sculpted and how it's painted. There is so much detail here. There's wires on the inside, there's tech detail on the outside, versus, of course, the normal hand, which is really nicely done as well. You can see skin texture, the nails are even painted blue, and of course this will perfectly match the rest of her outfit. It's nicely weathered and nicely sculpted. What we are going to do now, though, is get Nebula herself out here and take a closer look. And here we have Nebula herself standing straight up and down the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. And I have to say, this figure looks incredible. I love how simple yet effective this entire thing is. No matter where you are looking on this piece, and you'll see this in just a second, there is detail. It's detailed to the nines, not only in sculpt, but also in paint. It's weathered, it's gnarly, but also the head sculpt itself is really nice and punchy and vibrant. It all just works. The designers over at Marvel nailed it when it came to this updated look for Nebula. Don't get me wrong, I would still really like to see her first look from Guardians 1, but this one really takes the cake for me. I am loving how this piece comes across. The robotic arm pops really nicely against the red of the rest of the outfit, and as I said, it just all works. I also love the stance on this thing. She looks like she can kick some ass, and for what we know of Nebula, she definitely can. Stay tuned to the end of the video for 3 poses, hopefully showcasing some of the range on the figure. What we are going to do now, though, is take her off the rotating turntable, punch in, and take a closer look at the details. And here we have her up close and personal, and I have to say, honestly, right off the bat, Hot Toys have killed it. Look at that sculpt. You know exactly who that's supposed to be. It's Nebula through and through, and no, I'm not just talking about the blue face paint, I'm talking about the underlying sculpt. You can see Karen Gillan there, at least I personally can, and of course that means you can see Nebula as well. They pretty much perfectly captured the likeness. I don't think anyone could do better in any scale. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's just my personal opinion. I love the texture on that front section there, and it perfectly carries down to the neck as well. You can see it right there on the front. The interesting thing, though, is that neck is rubber, so it's a completely different material, but it perfectly matches the entire rest of the sculpt there. Of course, there is a bunch of detail. No matter where you're looking on this entire figure, there is detail to be seen. It's chock full of it, and it looks fantastic. Let's talk about this plate on the side. It looks really good. It's nicely weathered, it's nicely sculpted, it picks up the light, it's metallic, and I really like the way they've done it. What I don't necessarily like, though, is the fact that this plate can't be switched out, and yes, I will address that a little bit later in the video. Let's talk for a moment about the outfit. They've done some things really right, and some things not so right. The first thing that I really do like is all of these pleather-style pieces aren't pleather. They are a soft, sort of rubbery style plastic. That means they won't degrade over time. It's on the belt, it's on this strapping down here, it's on the gauntlets. That's a nice touch. That means that you won't have flaking, peeling belts, which often happens with Hot Toys pieces. I really do like that. What I don't necessarily like, though, is the way they've done the shoulders. This one looks incredibly big and baggy, whereas this one is a huge contrast. It's super slim, and it also sits rather low. There's a big gap on the side there, so I'm not necessarily loving the proportions. Yes, when you have it in a pose, when you have the arm up, it can go away, so it's not the biggest deal in the world, but in a natural stance, it's something that I personally did notice. Now, it's also interesting that this top part kind of works like a vest. It's a separate piece, so that means when you are moving the arm, it does flex up with it, which is a nice bonus because that means you're not going to have the usual hindrances with this section being attached to the arms themselves, so I really do like that. The weathering on the outfit is also really good, but let's talk for a moment about the material choice. It kind of feels like the Deadpool style material. It's soft and it can move and it will wrinkle, but that means it will crease. If you're not a huge fan of creases, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. This is going to get creased in poses, And being Nebula, she does some pretty acrobatic style action poses, so you will have to sort of come to grips with posing and creasing your figure. What I don't also necessarily like about the belt setup is this holster piece. You have to slot it through the D-rings. I mentioned this earlier in the accessory segment, and here it is. It sort of just flops on the front there. At least it lays flat, but you can tell it sits very far out from the leg itself. Honestly, I'm probably going to be detaching that for my personal copy. Moving down to the legs, you can see even more intricate details. It's asymmetrical. There's lines across the front here. This side has strapping. I really like the way it looks. I love when characters have asymmetrical outfits, even down to the boots themselves. They're completely different sculpts. It's a really nice touch. Even the front section is different with this strap going around the top there. I love the way it looks. What I don't love though, and I'm going to rant about this later in the video, is the ankle articulation, because of course there is none. It's fixed. Why is there no split cut boot design? They could have easily done it. Had this top portion come over the top and the foot be separate, it could have worked perfectly fine, but alas, they didn't do it. What we are going to do now though is kick off the side-by-side comparisons. And here we have Nebula standing alongside Peter Quill. This happens to be the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 version, and I have to say I really like how this looks. Yes, there is a height difference between the two, but it's not as drastic as I was expecting. Usually, when Hot Toys gives us female figures, they're really short, sometimes too short, but that's not the case with Nebula here. Honestly, I think she might be using an all-new body, and it works perfectly for this character. It's larger in scale, she scales better in my opinion with the rest of the Guardians. As you can see with Star-Lord right here, I cannot wait to get that 2.0 version of Gamora. Fingers crossed, it's not too far away. Next up, here we have the teenage version of Groot from Infinity War. As you can see, they are actually roughly the same height. It's just Groot's little spikies on top of his head, which make him look a little bit taller. He's a teenage version, he's not as massive as that adult one we saw in Guardians 1, so I think this works really nicely. Next up, here we have Drax the Destroyer standing alongside Nebula. This also looks really good. A lot of people for some reason like to hate on this Drax figure. I'm not exactly sure why. I personally really like it. They say the body's a little bit too flat, there's not enough definition, but I think in the right pose it can really work. Nevertheless, we're not here to talk about Drax, we're here to talk about what they look like together, and it looks great. I love the fact that Nebula isn't overly short, it just works perfectly. I was really worried about that because, as I said, sometimes they go on the smaller side, but not this time. I think this time they nailed it. And I'm pretty sure you can see what I mean with this example right here. Here's Gamora from Guardians 1. She's really short, versus Nebula from Endgame, she's really tall, so that makes a huge size difference between the two. The delta is massive. I don't think Nebula is supposed to be that tall compared to Gamora. Fingers crossed the new Gamora is on the same style body as this Nebula figure, because that means she's going to be a little bit taller and fit in scale with the rest of the male Guardians, which of course, you're having them all posed next to each other, it's just going to make sense, whereas this Gamora is just a little bit too tiny for me personally. Speaking of tiny, here we of course have the Endgame version of Rocket. He looks really good standing next to Nebula. There's no real frame of reference of exactly how tall Rocket is. I'm pretty sure he's entirely CGI. In fact, I know he is, so you can kind of fudge it, but honestly, this looks about right to me personally. They have nice matching materials, they look like they're made of the same stuff, and they're made to go alongside one another, which of course they are. I cannot wait to finally have a complete up-to-date version of the Guardians team. And finally, here we have Thanos himself standing next to his daughter Nebula. This works perfectly. Honestly, I'm really liking the way this looks, giving me flashbacks to the movie all over again, and I'm so glad that Hot Toys decided to not only do Thanos, but also Nebula as well. Honestly, that Gamora cannot come soon enough. I know I've said it like a million times already throughout the course of this video, but I am super excited. It should, fingers crossed, be one of the next figures released, and if it is, I cannot wait to cover it on the channel, because I would like to put Nebula on one side, Gamora on the other, and have both daughters of Thanos standing side by side. And of course, I couldn't end this comparison segment without doing a group shot. Here we have some of the Guardians. Of course, Yondu's not actually in this shot right here, but here we have some of them standing together, and I really like the way this looks. Yes, I know, I said I didn't really want an updated version of Drax, and when I'm talking about the body, I really don't, but I do want that new head sculpt that we saw at San Diego last year. It looked fantastic. I hope they go ahead and get the licensing rights to Dave Bautista's likeness to actually go ahead and make that. I know there are a couple of legal issues because he's got contracts signed with the wrestling and all that sort of stuff, so I hope they figure it out because honestly, I cannot wait to get a fully up-to-date, newly released with new technology version of all of these figures. Just going over articulation on Nebula. Now bear in mind this is my personal copy of the figure, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'm sure when you get yours in hand, you can push the joints slightly further than I'm willing to go. Starting off with the head sculpt itself, it is on a fixed neck, and as you can see, the range of motion forward and back is fairly limited, but all the rest is perfectly fine. It is a rubbery style neck, but as you can see, mine is starting to get scuffed just a little bit, so while you can move it a little bit forward and back, I would be a little bit more careful. The arms themselves will of course differ depending on which side we're talking about. The covered one first, going forward to about there before it starts bunching and getting a little bit more restricted, out to about there, butterfly joint up there as well. You do of course have a swivel at the upper bicep, a double bend there at the elbow, and of course a regular 1/6 scale joint for the wrist. This arm is completely different. There's no swivel at the bicep, the swivel is down here at the elbow, and it's only a single bend, as you can see right there. It's their way of sort of hiding the joint. I mean, you can still see it, but if it was a double bend, it would be a little bit more unsightly. Going out to about there, going forward pretty much as unrestricted as you'd expect, and of course a butterfly joint as well. The wrist, exactly the same as that side. For the torso, it is a pleathery style material, so it can bend and crunch, swivel and pivot side to side. The legs themselves going forward to about there, which is a fairly decent range of motion, going out to about there, swivel at the upper thigh, of course a double bend there at the knee, and my pet peeve, pretty much zero articulation in the ankle itself. Just going over the 3 cool and 3 annoying things about Nebula. The first annoying thing, I'm sure to nobody's surprise, is the ankle articulation, or of course lack thereof. Why was this not a split-cut boot design, or at the very least, vinyl boots? That means you could have gotten some pivot. I mean, you still can get some side to side, but as you can see, it sort of just pushes itself back out because it is that really strong, rubbery type of material. You don't want to be fighting with this because you might just tear it if you push it a little bit too far. The second annoying thing, and it might not necessarily be an annoying thing for you, but it's the drop down between this shoulder pad and this arm. You can see this arm looks like it's sitting a hell of a lot lower than this one. You know it isn't because it's pretty much the same attachment method as this arm itself, but because it's wearing an outer jacket, it looks a lot more seamless. To accommodate this, I think Hot Toys should have mounted this arm a little bit higher, or at the very least put it in a ball joint so we could shove this one up there just so it meets the top of this armor pad. And of course, the third annoying thing, again I'm sure to nobody's surprise, there's no orange streak to put on the top here. It would have been fairly easy to do, just a magnetic piece that went over the top, even a swap out interchangeable piece. You don't even need to do an entirely new head sculpt, just have that section come off. I don't know why they didn't. I think it would have been easy for them to do, but nevertheless I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of customizers out there, or even third-party companies going ahead and making third-party versions of this head sculpt. The first cool thing about Nebula has to be this head sculpt. It's fantastic. There's no two ways about it. You can tell exactly who this is supposed to be, not just because of the blue paint app, but also because of the sculpt. It's on point. It looks like Karen Gillan as Nebula. I love the subtle metallic paint over the top portion there, and of course the weathering throughout the entire thing. It looks so darn realistic. I honestly don't think they could have done a better job than what they've given us right here. It's pretty much, in my mind, bang on to the film itself. The second cool thing is all of the material pieces that you would otherwise expect to be pleather is made out of a harder style rubber. Don't get me wrong, it's still flexible, but being made out of this stuff rather than pleather means that it won't flake and separate over time. This, in my opinion, is far and away the best way to do belts and strapping for 1/6 scale figures. The third cool thing is, of course, the robotic arm. It's gorgeous. I love the metallic finish and the fact that it's pretty much seamless. I mean, you can see a joint in there. Yes, I mean, it's very visible, but still, It's a robotic arm, it's uncovered, you get the fullest range of motion that you can expect, and just look at the detail all the way down to the hand itself, with a matching robotic colored cybernetic wrist peg, where the other side has a blue one. They definitely have gone all out with this arm. Just wrapping up on the Avengers Endgame version of Nebula. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm super happy with this thing. I know I've nitpicked a couple of things here and there, but at the end of the day, I'm kind of willing to forgive pretty much all of it, even the lack of split-cut boot design, because we haven't ever gotten a Nebula before, and we may never get a Nebula again. I'm just glad that we are actually getting this character. A lot of you out there who like Hot Toys, who collect Marvel figures, said, I want Hot Toys to do a Nebula. Nebula, please, when's that gonna happen? It's happening now. You owe it to yourself to go ahead and pick this thing up, because as I said, it likely won't ever be happening again. If we want Hot Toys to keep making obscure characters that don't necessarily have the biggest amount of screen time, we have to show them that we want to support characters like this. I want to see a Mantis, I want to see a Valkyrie, and honestly, the only way that those characters might actually happen is if we support figures like this one and Gamora as well. I know it's a bit of a rant, but still, we have to show them that there is love for these characters, specifically the off-the-wall ones. The figure itself is pretty darn good. The head sculpt is fantastic, the paint-ups are fantastic as well. Where it does fall apart a little bit for me personally is the outfit. It's that pleathery style material once again. I know they can't really use anything else to get that level of texture and that level of detail into the suit at this scale. It's really the only way to do it, so I'm willing to forgive it. Does that mean I'm not just a little bit frustrated with not being able to put her in crazy awesome poses forever? Yeah, I kind of am, but as I said, I personally am willing to forgive it, but that's just my opinion. You absolutely do not have to agree with me. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Now, if you are looking to pick up Nebula, she is in stock right now with toyswonderland.com. The link for that is, of course, down in the description below. They have 12-month installment plans now available if you're a fan of paying off your figures over time. Also, while you're down there, why not check out the link to 6 Scale Network, the awesome Facebook group. Come along, chat figures, share photos of your collection, and of course, see what's coming up next on the channel. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.